This is the lesson on first aid sections 4 and 5. We're going to cover target number 2, which will explain the basic first aid to injuries. Let's first start off with what sprains and strains are. A sprain is a torn or stretched ligament, as opposed to a strain, which is a torn or stretched muscles. So please notice the difference here. Sprain, SP, and strain, ST. How many of you have played basketball and twisted an ankle? That would be a sprain. How many of you have done gymnastics and maybe have sprained your hands doing a handspring? That's also a sprain. How many of you have ran in track or cross country and pulled a hamstring or a quadricep? That's a strain. So what do we do for sprains or strains treatment-wise? We like to use the acronym RICE. R for rest, I for ice, C for compression, and E for elevation. If you take a look at the picture here, it's a great example of what it looks like. Rest, ice, compression, and then elevation. Fractures. Fractures are a cracked or broken bone. Depending on the situation or where the break might occur, you might need to call 911. If it's a finger, probably not. If it's a femur, probably need to call 911. You can use a splint if you need to stabilize a broken area. Some of your parents might have used popsicle sticks or pencils in the past to if you had a broken finger. You can take a look at the picture below here and see the different types of fractures that we have. Severe bleeding. Well, here's how you treat it. First, you need to call 911. Lay the person down. Put on gloves. Why do we put gloves on? I don't want to touch any of someone else's blood or bodily fluid. I don't know who has diseases and who doesn't. So in order for us to stay protected, put on gloves. If you don't have gloves, use cloth from a shirt to cover it, or a Ziploc bag. Put your hands in a bag, something so, or have them, if they're able to go ahead and put that cloth on there, they can go ahead and do it themselves. So have that area covered, and then elevate that area above the heart. Why would we do that? Remember, on planet Earth, we've got gravity. Things are pulled down. So if we raise our hand, it's going. When we go ahead and pump our blood, it's slower to get to the fingertips. If I put my hand down, it's going to rush right down quickly. So in order for me to slow the blood flow, I want to go ahead and raise my hand or body part above that heart. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply pressure. That will stop the bleeding or slow the bleeding down. Poisoning. Anything that makes a person sick when swallowed. Think about it. Those of you that babysit. Young kids like to get into things. Pills, they think that they look like candy. So what do you do when you're babysitting and someone has swallowed something? Maybe it's Windex, blue, they might think it's Kool-Aid. First and foremost, call 911 or the local poison control. You should have this emergency number by any landline phone or programmed into your cell phone. Be aware that emergency personnel will want to know what was swallowed, how much was swallowed, your exact location, and then the condition of the person. So you can say, look, there was some blue liquid, maybe a cup, I'm not sure how much was consumed, or there's some white pills here, I don't know how many were in the container. Just get as specific as you possibly can. Shock. Shock is when the circulatory system slows down. This can be from an accident. This can be from a trauma. This is going to affect their body temperature. When the circulatory system slows down, their body temperature is going to slow down. Therefore, it's going to go down and they're going to get cold. So how do we treat shock? First and foremost, call 911. Then lie the person on the ground. Cover them with a blanket. Why? because that body temperature is going to be going down. Raise their feet above their heart and stay with the victim until help arrives. Seizure. A seizure is an uncontrollable attack of nerve cells of the brain. This can occur due to an accident, drug interactions, or a condition called epilepsy. We do have some students here at Twin Groves that do have epilepsy and are prone to have seizures. It might be scary the very first time that you see it, and that's why we go over this, so that way you are more familiar of what's going to happen. So what do? First and foremost, move the person to the floor. Move away all objects nearby, because during a seizure they might be moving all over. They're not going to know what's going on. Let the person have their seizure. They won't last very long, maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds to a minute. Lay the person on their side.
Ben Levin, could you...
The reason why we lay the person on their side is they might tend to vomit. And so if a person is laying down on their back and they vomit, then now we have probably a choking situation. So you turn them over on their side, and if they do vomit, they'll be throwing up on the ground. And the last thing, do I call 911? Some people say yes, some people say no. If it's an accident, car accident or a bike accident, yes, you should call 911 right away. If it's a person that has been prone to seizures before, and they're less than 1 minute in length, then no, you should not call 911. Let's go into some weather-related emergencies. Just got off a very hot summer, and now we're starting to head into fall and winter here, so let's take a look here. First and foremost, let's take a look at hypothermia. This is when the body temperature becomes too low. Usually seen in the cold, winter time, or it could be seen during the summertime, getting out of that cold pool. The wind is kicking up. You get those goosebumps all over you. You start to shiver a little bit. So what do? You take the person out of the cold, call 911, cover them with a blanket. Why? Body temperature becomes too low. We want to keep them nice and warm, and stay with them until help arrives. Now, if you're getting out of a pool and you're shivering a little bit, some of you have thrown on sweatshirts before or a towel, that's fine. If your lips start turning blue, then it's more severe. Then we need to go ahead and call 911. You can take a look at my guy right down here. It looks a little chilly. Hyperthermia is when the body temperature is too high. It's usually seen in the summertime, especially when we have the 100-degree days out there. So you get the person out of the sun, get them in some shade, call 911, give them some water, cool water, hose them down, get a sprinkler on this person, get a hose, spray them down, and stay with them until help arrives. Take a look at that picture. You know, people with hyperthermia might also go ahead and have nausea and vomiting because their body temperature is too high. And the last one is frostbite. This is when the body tissue freezes. Usually seen in the wintertime when you're not wearing gloves. Because it's the outer extremities, the fingers, the toes, the nose, and the ears. So get the person out of the cold, call 911, warm the affected area under warm water, cover in a clean cloth. The fingers, if there is frostbite, will turn blue, a waxy gray blue color. They'll be numb. You won't be able to feel them because you've killed off the nerve endings. And if it's severe enough, those parts might have to be amputated. So that way we don't have any other infection.